All right. Happy Friday, everybody. This is one of those no class Fridays, right?
Yes.
So we have resumes on our mind today. Thank you all for inviting me in to talk about this. It's one of the most popular topics, if not the most popular topic, why somebody would come and talk to us in Career and Calling. My name's Aaron Swartz. I'm the Director of Career and Calling here at HBU. And just so you know, I do have a partner in this thing, Deborah. I don't know if anybody's met Deborah before, but she is the Assistant Director of Career and Calling. She focuses a lot on internships and work study, and various things. I think we wear lots of hats in Career and Calling, talking to students about what major should I do, or what do I do with this particular major. What's my calling? How do I look for a job? There's lots of different things that students would come and talk to us about. But obviously today we're focused a little bit on resumes. And if you guys have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'll try to address them as we go. But this can be interactive. Feel free to jump in, interrupt if you need to. I'd like it to be as interactive as you guys want it to be. So today we'll talk about resumes, uh, just what goes into a resume, what are some key things to be looking for, and one of the main takeaways that I want you guys to get um, is how do I target my resume for a particular job or situation or grad school. And that's it can be tricky because you probably won't have one resume that works for every single thing that you are trying to do. When you're trying to find a job on campus, your resume is going to look different than a job trying to get a full-time job in a lab, or it'll look different than when you put a resume together, trying to impress somebody for. So they're going to look a little bit different, again, just kind of depending on what you're ready for. It's not uncommon for people to have multiple versions of their resume, in that regard. So when you're putting your resume together, oftentimes there's what I like to call like a hybrid or even a combination resume, where there are categories or functions, different categories, different headings in your resume. So a lot of times people will start, and we'll get to these slides here in a second, but after your contact info, your number, your email address, all that, people will start off with a summary profile. Sometimes on resumes, you see something called an objective. It's not my personal favorite, based on years and years of talking to employers. They would much rather see what you're bringing to the table. So a sum file, kind of it's a quick synopsis of what your skills are, what your experience is. That's an example of a first header, a first function. Oftentimes you'll see, education leading it off, especially as somebody who's still in school. Having education high on the resume is often good, especially if you are an above average student. You got these merit scholarships, have good grades, you have dean's list, or you're an honor student. All those different things that separate you from, let's say, just an average student. If there's something exceptional about your educational experience, then you want to build that up a little bit. Notice there's also what people call chronological resumes, which is kind of a rundown of your history. If any of you have ever looked at the what's it called, the Internet Movie Database, IMDb, like if you're looking up somebody's movie history, it's just what I did most recently, what I did 5 years ago, what I did 10 years ago. It's just a chronological rundown. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that as you guys gain more experience, or if you do research projects with professors, or you have your own stuff that gets published in academia and in scientific research, resume isn't often what people look at. They'll look at something called a CV, or a curriculum vitae. So if you guys have ever seen like somebody say, "Oh, here's my CV," or if a professor showed you their fancy curriculum vitae of like 15 different years of publications and research projects, that's something that scientific individuals as well as academians, they work towards. Now it might be kind of tough to put together a really long CV as a sophomore in college, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind that there is a way to display lots of the research and projects, and if you get published, there's a way to show that, whether it be in resume format or in CV format, and that's often chronological. So what are some of the just kind of quick tips when it comes to starting your resume? And I'm sure some of you probably have a resume, and that's fine. What I would recommend is take some notes and go back and look at the resume that you have currently created, to make sure that it's being optimized for what you want it to do. If you've never done a resume before, um, we have some resources that can help you with that online, and I'm going to show those to you here in a moment. But here's some things to start off with. It's if you're in school and you don't have a whole lot of experience, most students have a one-page resume. Now, if you're really involved, or if you have some experience, then maybe a two-pager. Uh, the more experience you get and the further you get in your career, then you're talking longer resumes. Or like we were talking, like I mentioned on the slide before, if you develop a CV or a curriculum vitae, those are often fairly lengthy because they go into much more detail, and they're project based, and it's something to work towards. You want to make sure that you don't overwhelm people with too much content. So if you try to cram everything onto one page and there's very little white space, um, it might be displeasing to the eye for who's looking at it. So one of the things you want to make sure is that your resume is readable, it's legible, it has a good flow to it. And a lot of that is very subjective. It might be something where you just have a couple people look at it. Have myself look at it, have Deborah look at it, have Amy look at it, have a couple of your professors. And the thing is that we aren't all going to agree. That's one of the things about resume. Even amongst people who do resumes all the time, you might have some conflicting suggestions or recommendations, but that's okay because you are the one who has to own your resume. So take the guidelines you see online and take the advice that I give you or a professor gives you, and make the resume best for what you want it to do. Like I said, ultimately it's your document. And information is good. It's good to have more information, even if you disagree with it or you don't use a particular style, or whatever the situation might be. You want to make sure it's best for what you're trying to do. Notice the quote here that Deborah put on this presentation: "A resume represents you when you are not in the room." That's so true because it's a marketing representation um, of who you are. What you are professionally, what you are educationally, what your skills are. Um, it can make or break whether or not somebody contacts you for a grad school type of situation, or for a part-time or full-time job. A resume is, so it's worth putting a few extra, minutes, even hours into your resume to make sure it's what you want it to be when you're applying for, that great position. Um, don't get too crazy with your fonts. Don't go and download some new font that might not be legible on lots of Word documents out there. Now, one thing to think about is when you design your resume, it's probably best to do it using a fresh blank sheet of Word, because you can do essentially whatever you need to with it. When you actually save it and send it to somebody for a job or for an application, if you can, try to save it as a PDF. And I don't know if anybody's ever experienced this, but sometimes when you send a Word document to somebody, it doesn't look exactly the way you want it to on the other end. Like, maybe the formatting messes up, or like the header hides hides away or something. A PDF is great because it captures the document the way you want it to be seen. So that's kind of an expert tip, if you will, is if possible, upload your resume to an online app PDF rather than a Word document. Now, sometimes they'll want you to send obviously you have to follow directions. So if they ask it as a Word document, then you got to comply with that. But if they don't say, then I would say the default should be a PDF because that's in your best interest. Now, these are my top 5 just kind of general tips as it goes to putting a resume together. You want to make sure that you are focused on what I call rank order. So if I'm looking at this example resume here, um, I I'm saying that my education is the most important, and then technical skills, and then my experience, and then volunteer, and then awards and activities. And these are all example categories. And this document is actually saved on our website. If you are working from scratch or you like the way this resume is formatted or laid out, you can actually use this Word document to design your resume by putting your information in here instead. It's on the website hbu.edu/career library, and I'm going to go to that website here in a second so you guys can see what all is out there. But rank order means, are my categories in most important or most relevant to the job I'm applying for or the grad school I'm trying to get into to least important? And this isn't the perfect order for everybody. Everybody's a little bit different. If somebody has a lot of experience, especially in the field they're going into, it's very possible that experience needs to be higher on this resume. For this person, they have a 4.0 GPA. It makes sense that their education is higher than their professional experience. So it really just depends. There's no right or wrong. If you were to ask me, what should I put first or what should my rank order be, I could answer it based on, if it were me. But I think ultimately, again, you want to own your resume and you want to be comfortable with the order that you pick. It's good to have specifics on there. If you have any type of specific certification, or if you are bilingual in a second language in English, it's good to have specific skill sets on there. Sometimes I see skills categories that talk about stuff like communication skills and leadership, and all that's great, but make sure that you have some specific stuff on there too, so people can see, oh, okay, they can type this fast, or they have this particular technical skill set. So if you have some specifics or accomplishments to talk about, make sure that you put those in there. Top half versus bottom half is making sure that the top half of your resume is the most important, most relevant stuff you're trying to get across. Because believe it or not, they're not going to read every single word that you write on your resume. It's just people are busy out there, they might not read it all. So you want to make sure that you make a positive impact with your summary, with the first category, the second category that you have on there. And if you think about it, even within these little categories here, like let's say you're trying to describe a job that you had on campus, you want the most impactful, most relevant statement to be the first one underneath each job. Okay. So if the most important, most relevant thing is this, then this is working for you. If it's this thing here, this summarized statement, then we need to move it up here to the top bullet point. So again, going back to rank order, not just the categories, but within the category, making sure that you have the most important stuff where it's easier to read. This is the point that I made a couple slides ago. Each resume might be just a tad different, because if you are applying for grad school versus getting a part-time job on campus, there might be little things that you want to emphasize. So make sure that you're targeting it to the job or situation that you want to get to. Now, once you have a resume that's in kind of like final draft form, have somebody else look at it. Don't, and you guys might do this with your essays or papers for classes, because what you put on the resume, you want to get other people's feedback. You want to be kind of a 360 feedback type of situation where you get Deborah or myself to look at it, or somebody who works in the industry, or you're a professor who you trust their feedback. Make sure that you get their feedback. And what I mean by call worthy is, if you pretend that you or the person looking at it is the hiring manager, or they are the HR person, ask them, like, hey, is this resume match up to the job that I'm trying to get? Would somebody call me? And that's really the whole point of the resume, is to get contacted. You want them to call you or email you based on what you sent them. So just a few key kind of macro ideas to think about as you're putting your resume together. So Using action-oriented verbs, that's a good thing. Obviously, spell check, grammar check, double check it yourself, have somebody else look at it. Make sure that you use phrases as opposed to complete paragraphs and complete sentences. Now, this is, they survey people who look at resumes, and I think it's like 98 or 99 out of 100 would much rather read short, succinct phrases like what was on the previous slide here. Like, these aren't complete sentences, these are phrases. And that's just resume formatting. That's the way people expect to look at it. So make sure that you're not talking in first person and you're not using full paragraphs, because the likelihood of them reading all that goes down if you're too wordy and you're using sentence case instead of phrases. So make sure you know who you're sending it to. We've said that a couple different times, targeting, etc. This is a key thing right here, keywords and buzzwords. As you develop your resume and as you start applying for types of jobs or particular types of grad schools, look for of their programs or the jobs. Are there keywords or phrases that are needed? Now, you want to make sure that your resume is matching that job description. That's essentially what targeting your resume means. You don't want to plagiarize. You don't want to copy and description or from a medical school program or something and put that in your resume. Obviously, you don't want to plagiarize. But if there are certain skill sets or keywords you see that kind of repeat themselves in different programs and jobs, you want to make sure that you find a way to work those words into your summary, into your statement that you have on your resume, because that's what people want to see. And if anybody's heard about like the computer programs uh, that sometimes get used to scan resumes, they're doing the same thing. They're giving you a resume score based on matching your resume to a particular description that they're trying to match. So a perfect resume would get a score of 100. A terrible resume would get a score of like 5 or 10. So you want to make sure that your resume is lined up to that, because the larger the company, the larger the organization, the more likely they might use one of those things called an applicant tracking system, where they look for keywords, buzzwords, relevant experience, relevant education. A summary is very important because that's the first thing they're going to see. Summary, profile, summary of qualifications. It's called different things, but that's a really good impact statement to start your resume, and it gives somebody a kind of a preview. It's like a trailer to a movie. Your summary on your resume is what's going to convince them to keep reading it, that you're a good candidate for it. Do not. So sometimes you'll see references on resumes. I don't recommend it. I think it's better to use a separate sheet for that. You can, same way with like cover letter. Cover letters, references, those should be designed their own way. Those should be different documents. So I would encourage you to start listing your references just on a separate sheet of Word document. And try not to use abbreviations. Especially if it's something that could be conceived as two different things. Make sure that you're, like, for example, you want to spell out your degree. So don't cut corners where you don't need to. In the United States, it's not typical to have your resume, or I'm sorry, your picture on your resume. There are some countries in the world that do expect that. United States is not one of those. Shouldn't put your age or your date of birth or your social security number. No, none of that stuff that they don't need to know. And be careful about things like hobbies and interests. Now, I think that sometimes it can be good to have something interesting about you, but don't put down that you have 5 dogs, or like you like spending time with your cousins. That's not necessarily resume content. You want to try to keep it as professional and academic oriented as possible. So here's some example ways to lay out your header. One trend that I like to point out over the last 10 years is that the physical address is often not on the resume anymore, because they're not going to show up at your house. They're not going to mail you something. That's not the way they're going to contact you. They're going to call you or they're going to email you. So make sure that you focus on a professional email, whether that's your school email or your name at gmail.com. Don't use an email that's not professional. That's not a good look. And then, if you have a LinkedIn page, especially if it's a pretty thorough LinkedIn page, you can put that on there in addition to your email and your phone number. But more and more, it's not essential to have your physical address on there. The one exception that I say there is that if the physical address is an advantage. So for example, this guy, John, if he was applying for a job in Huntsville, Alabama, and it just so happened to be in the same zip code, then that would be a plus. Like somebody would look at that as like, hey, that guy lives like a mile away from here. This is great. He could walk to work. Same way if you were applying for a job on campus, somebody hiring students on campus, if they saw that you lived on campus, you might get preferential, call over somebody who lives in Cypress, Texas, because that person who lives in Cypress, it's going to take them an hour, hour and a half to get to school. So, if your physical address is advantageous to where you're applying, then include it. If it's not, then don't include it. So the summary statement, sometimes this can be a little weird to write a third person statement about, summarizing your professional and educational life. But think about what it is that you're bringing to the table. You're a pre-med bio major studying at HBU with 2 years of customer service experience and 1 year of whatever it is. Think about the 3 to 5 statements that you would include in a summary or profile that would convince somebody to keep reading the resume. And again, it's one of the weirdest things to write on a resume because it kind of seems like a brag post almost, but it doesn't have to be seen that way. See it as what are 3 to 5 statements that you would want them to know right away. Because again, this is a statement that is very high on the resume. It's very important for them to know these things. Like for example, in Houston, Texas, it's awesome if you are bilingual English Spanish. That is a great plus because those of us that aren't bilingual English Spanish, we're at a disadvantage because we might not be able to communicate to somebody who prefers to speak Spanish first. So that would be an example of a skill set that you could include in your summary profile that separates you from those of us that don't have that particular skill set. Um, you saw the example resume. Here's some other categories that sometimes pop up. Volunteer experience is really popular with college students. It's like leadership. Sometimes leadership can be a good category to have on there. I'm going to stop sharing this screen real quick because I want to show you guys online where to find some of these resources. So if you go to hbu.edu/career library, this is a sub-site of our website. And on here, we have example resume templates. Actually, this presentation is on here. Um, different different resources when it comes to like the curriculum vitae and the cover letter. And then there's other links to, just, interviewing, lots of different great resources on there. Lots of stuff that we moved a lot of our resources online, obviously, over the last 7 months or so, just to make sure that you guys have what you need, for that. So I am going to slow down for a second here because I want to open it up to see if you guys have any specific questions. I don't see anything in the chat boxes. Feel free to throw something in there. Does anybody have any, specific resume questions or things that you want to share? I'm going to include my resume over in the chat, just in, not resume, my email address, just in case you guys want to email me your resume. Deborah and I love looking at resumes. We're a little weird like that. Not everybody loves a resume. But so, we love looking at resumes. We like helping students with that. And there's our contact info. So feel free to unmute yourself or jump in or put something in the chat if you guys have any questions whatsoever. Anybody want to be a brave first question asker? If not, that's okay too. I mean, you're, like I said, you're always welcome to reach out to Deborah or myself. If you guys have, specific resume questions, like I said, there's lots of resources online. This PowerPoint is online at the Career Library as well. There you can see both of our email addresses. We also have a general email inbox as well. Well, if there are no questions, I will turn it back over to T. And I don't know if you guys have anything else on your agenda today.
I believe that's it. Just having you speak with us today and give us really helpful advice. Thank you for that.
Of course. And I noticed the little red blinking button up there. So you guys save this
Yes,
in case you need
exactly.
to go back and see it. And like I said, the PowerPoint or PDF is on that career library resource as well in case anybody wants those slides. But as I said,
Yes,
you're more than welcome to email me your resume or any questions you guys have.
sounds good. Yes, I'm recording the um, this session so that any members that aren't able to attend the live session can view it on our website. So
Very good, very good. Well, thank you for inviting me to come in. I love that. Just one quick plug. I know that a lot of you guys are thinking pre-med or things like that, but we also have a career fair in 3 weeks. It's the Education, Government, and Non. I know it's a mouthful. Education, Government, Nonprofit Career Fair. So if you guys are possibly thinking about going into any type of nonprofit or government work, or maybe being a science teacher at some point, it would be good for you guys to get experience. All of our career fairs and workshops and things this semester with employers are virtual, just like so many things are these days. But take a look at that. All of our events and career fairs are in Handshake. And if you guys are unfamiliar with Handshake, or like maybe you've heard about it a little bit, um, if you go to the career and calling icon on the student portal, click on that, it automatically takes you into Handshake, and you can post your resume, look for jobs. It's essentially the new Hire a Husky. So if any of you used Hire a Husky over the past 2 or 3 years, Handshake is the new and improved version of that. So look for that resource out there. And like I said, please reach out at any point. We love talking to students about resumes and job searching.
sounds good. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. We all really appreciate.
Of course.
Um,
No, thank you again, and have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you. You too. Okay, let me stop the recording.